What's up, Flannelverse? It is week 5, Thursday night football tonight. We've got the 49ers at the Rams. We'll be breaking it down position by position, quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends, defenses, and kickers. Take any questions you have along the way. I am here with Adam, ShipMyMoney, Scherer. Adam, how did week 4 go for you, and how are you feeling about week 5?
Week 4 kind of sucked. It was similar to how the season's gone in general, though. Like, I, knock on wood, haven't had a week yet where it's just like very unexpected things happen, or like things that I, didn't think could happen. But it was another week where I had good teams overall, and then, something went wrong. Or things didn't quite get there. But those weeks, definitely give you a lot more confidence, I think, than the ones where it's just like, oh, I didn't even think that was a good play, or I didn't, whatever. So yeah, looking forward to week 5. Wish it was starting with a better game than this one.
Yeah, this is kind of an ugly game. We will get into that. I forgot you had some sweat on Sunday a little bit.
Yeah,
I never really had a sweat on Sunday. It was probably my worst week overall of the season so far. Like, I don't think I had anything that was like ever close to winning like real money. The showdowns, I don't think I ever had a real sweat. So I think that was the first time, like, every week prior to last week, I had like actual sweats, like coming down to the final minutes of showdown. Maybe I did on Thursday Night Football. Either way, yeah, not my best week last week, but also like didn't lose at all. Like, it was kind of like I was, losing half, maybe less than half my money. So, I'll take that most weeks, I guess. Let's get into this game. As we have discussed, it is a gross one. We have several players out on the 49ers. George Kittle was already out. Now we got Brock Purdy's out, so Mac Jones is starting. Ricky Pearsall, Jawan Jennings both out. On the other side, we have Tyler Higbee out. Nick Bosa also out for the 49ers defense, for what that is worth. So a lot of moving pieces here. But the first place, so we're going to start talking with quarterbacks, but I actually want to start with the Mac Jones talk on FanDuel in particular, where Mac Jones, for anybody who is not hyper online and doesn't know, Mac Jones is $1,000 on FanDuel today. They priced him like he had no chance of starting, which like DraftKings over time, you used to find that on DraftKings with backup quarterbacks. Over time, they've just like set the minimum price, even for backup quarterbacks, at $6,000. FanDuel left Mac Jones at $1,000, and now he's starting. So the question is, like, how much ownership is too much? Like, if he comes in, let me put it this way: if he comes in at 95% owned, do you think you'd want more or less?
in the like lottos,
Yeah,
my guess is less because of this specific slate and the fact that I don't know the exact pricing off the top of my head, but I'm sure that, Kendrick Bourne,
yeah,
MVS, every pass catcher, Robinson, every pass catcher on the Niners, I'm sure isn't that expensive. So like, you have McCaffrey to pay for, you have Puka, you have Adams, you have Stafford. There are guys to pay for, but it's not like a game where you have a 1K quarterback and then you have everybody else you would possibly want is expensive. In a situation like that, I'd be more inclined to say, like, I don't really like, yeah, it sucks because he's going to be super popular, but I don't really know the way around it. Whereas on a slate like this, you're probably leaving enough salary on the table that in most of your builds that it's wide open for, like, Mac Jones actually probably, in terms of raw points, needs to beat a pretty good number of people.
true.
It's not just a point per dollar thing. So my first inclination, because of the options on this slate, is that he obviously should be very popular at that salary, but you probably actually need a real score from him for him to be optimal.
Yeah, if he puts up 6 fantasy points at 1,000, might not get there.
You're right. Like 10 might not get there.
Yeah,
The one thing though, like, it is different with it being FanDuel compared to DraftKings too, like, because of it being half PPR versus full.
yeah.
It is slightly less likely that he loses out to any given pass catcher.
Yeah, that is true. That's a good point, because we have so many cheap options. Like, it is easy for multiple of them to outscore him. I think I largely agree with what Chris says here. He says I'll play him, but not at captain. I think that's genuinely where I'm at also. If he's going to be hyper owned at captain, which I think is the expectation, is there's going to be a lot of lineups that just have Mac Jones at captain, Christian McCaffrey, Puka Nacua, Matthew Stafford, Devontae Adams, whoever is left over, just like jam all the most expensive players in the flex. And to me, that's just like you're going to be playing hyper duped lineups if you play him in the captain with a lineup that projects well. Like those are just going to be super high owned. Whereas if you can play him in the flex and play Puka or McCaffrey or whatever in the captain spot, and that's probably going to end up looking a lot better. So that would be kind of my inclination on FanDuel.
Yeah, I mean, the projections that we have in ownership projections we have in right now is him getting 9% at captain, 86 at flex.
Okay, 9 at captain, that's not too bad.
Yeah, I mean, because my thinking there is just like, I don't think people actually play McCaptain that much because you do have McCaffrey, you do have Puka, who are clearly very appealing captain options. But again, because like you don't have anybody expensive on the Niners, you just run out of ways pretty quickly that you need Mac Jones at captain.
Yeah, no, that is very true. Yeah, if he comes in at 9% captain, maybe that would be okay. I guess I would not be too upset about 9%. Yeah, I don't know. We don't need to talk too much about FanDuel, but it sounded like you think that maybe Nerdy and Brick are going to be doing a video on that specific situation.
Yeah, they mentioned it being something interesting. Maybe they could talk about over at Endgame. So I don't know for sure if they're going to do it, but I agree it would be interesting because we do see this situation come up. Like, obviously, it's not super common, but it does come up occasionally. I mean, I remember you had this was, I mean, shit, I guess like 9-10 years ago now, but FanDuel had the day that they just priced everybody facing Clayton Kershaw at like $200 or something insane. That's the one that, always just really stands out. But you do get the situations like this that come up occasionally where it's just a complete mispricing and you're really weighing like the extremes of like, okay, how is this guy not optimal versus if something happens, he is literally 90-something% owned. Because I mean, that's the other thing too in football. I mean, you don't want it to happen, obviously, from just like a human standpoint, but like
Right.
There's always some chance that like Mac Jones doesn't make it through the first quarter.
Right. He could get hurt. He probably doesn't get benched. Like I don't
he's
really
not getting benched, but I mean,
yeah, but like yeah, you can see it all the time in football. Obviously, it's been a big issue. Like this week in particular, we're looking at so many players are out with injuries. Yeah, that is just football. Yeah, I don't know.
I just ran a FanDuel sim using our ownership projections while we were talking, and again, that was with him projected 86% at flex, 9% at MVP. In 150 lineups, I ended up with 77 at flex, 8 at MVP. So pretty close to the field, but a little bit below. And that's pretty in line, I think, with what I was thinking, where like obviously you're going to want him in a lot of lineups, but because there are so many other cheap plays and you are leaving salary on the table in a lot of lineups, I mean like a lot of salary on the table in a lot of lineups, I would think that you want a little bit less than you would on slates where maybe that wasn't the case.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. Yeah, it's interesting. It's just like a little bit less in both the captain or both MVP and the any flex. Oh, okay. I mean, that's probably gives you a good indication of what you should be doing, just using those numbers. And that's kind of the fun thing about Run the Sims. Quick plug here. If you want to check out like where is like if it comes in at 60%, how much would you want? If it comes in at 99%, how much you want? You can play with that at Run the Sims by just changing the ownership numbers. So that's always a cool feature of Run the Sims. You can kind of check out like, all right, what would it look like in different scenarios? How much would I want? So even beyond just like making better lineups for you, you can also have some fun, learn a little bit about DFS by playing around with the numbers, with the inputs at Run the Sims.
Yeah, and I think that's actually like an underrated use case of Sims in general. And
yeah,
I personally am a lot lazier with it than I should be, but like I think you could actually make the argument in a lot of cases that like Sims are more powerful as a like training tool and like how should I approach DFS maybe even than they are on like the contest level where you have so much volatility and inputs and all of that. But yeah, I mean to your point, like you can in fragile situations like this, it can really help your decision making and craft your strategy for a slate. Not only like you were saying, where like you can say like, all right, like how good of a play is he if he's actually only 65%, or how bad of a play is he if he's 100. You can also say, like obviously, just Mac Jones himself at quarterback in this game, how he performs is extremely volatile. So you can also say, like, all right, if we assume that, ownership projections are more or less correct here, but let's, dock his projection, get him down, change whatever you need to change, get him down to 10 fantasy points. Is he still a really good play? How low of a projection can we get on Mac Jones before he's not a good play anymore?
Right. Yeah. It's definitely worth checking out, playing around with if you are interested in that kind of stuff. You can use promo code Neil to get 10% off your first payment on any product at Run the Sims if you do want to check it out and play around with it. That will, of course, what we're talking about is the Sims product specifically. So you would need one of the products that at least includes Sims to be able to check that out. But yeah, if you are interested, you can use link in description or promo code Neil to check it out. Adam, let's get into the DraftKings slate. We primarily like to talk about DraftKings here. I just thought that was such an interesting spot that we had to at least like touch on the Mac Jones at 1,000 because it's like, I don't know.
You're coming on Torrey Horton. You're touching on Mac Jones.
What, okay, all right. Well, whatever. That one's not so bad. That's regular English. I thought you said you couldn't hear me for a second. I was like, God, did I lose my mic again? I've been having.
Oh no, I heard you.
Okay, good. I've been having mic and headphone issues off and on like for the past week. So I was like, damn it, I lost. Okay. Yeah, we needed to quickly stroke Mac Jones, and now we can move on to the DraftKings slate, where I guess we'll talk about Mac Jones as a starting place again. 49ers, Mac Jones coming in at 45% flex ownership, 5% captain ownership. He is 9,200. Doesn't run a lot. He's more expensive here, more appropriately priced, 9,200 here. How much are you getting to of Mac Jones?
I should probably get back to that page. Still getting a good amount of him, obviously less on DraftKings. I have 55% at flex right now, 8% at captain. The ownership projections I used there have 39% at flex and not much at all at captain. So it's actually me getting over the field at captain and then a little bit over the field at flex as well. And I do think it makes some sense. Like you said, he doesn't run a lot, but he runs a little bit. He has, at least he at least has rushing upside in the sense of like, maybe he has to escape the pocket and runs for 25 yards or something. He's not doing a lot of stuff by design. But one thing I do like about him kind of at captain, if he's going to be very low owned, and you can see on your screen, we have a 5% captain ownership projection on him. So like, I think at 5%, I probably, it's probably more efficient than the number I used. The one thing that is nice is because of the way this game breaks down, obviously like Kendrick Bourne could just have a career game, or MVS could do the thing where he scores 2 touchdowns on 2 catches and has 180 yards. But there's a good chance that like things just get spread out amongst the Niners because outside of McCaffrey, you don't have one dominant player there. So if it does happen to be a good passing game for the Niners, a game where they're scoring through the air, they're moving the ball through the air, it is a little bit more likely that Mac Jones is just the best piece of that because, Bourne scores 1, Sky Moore scores 1, MVS scores 1, whatever it may be, and Mac Jones just ends up beating the guy. You're muted now.
Yeah. Agreed. Are you when you play Mac Jones? So I'd say like he can run like, but he's never averaged more than he's never averaged double-digit rushing yards per game in his career. Like you don't expect him to run a ton, but we have seen it like in several Showdown games recently where I'm like, yeah, this guy doesn't really run at all. And then of course he in that game runs for Sam Darnold ran for like 30 yards and I don't know if he scored a touchdown, but was optimal in a weird way. So it certainly can happen. But typically when you have Mac Jones in your lineup, are you stacking him up? And at captain, do you have him multi-stacked?
Yeah, multi-stacking at captain for the most part, like 3. It looks like a couple of them have 2, but a lot of him plus McCaffrey plus like 2 receivers or tight end, whatever, pass catchers. Where I have him at flex, I would assume it's still a lot of stacking just because, for one, McCaffrey is going to be in so many of my lineups. True. And that obviously counts as a stacking piece. But even beyond that, it's getting to other pass catchers as well. Because again, like you just have cheap pass catchers everywhere for the Niners.
Yeah, true. All right, let's talk Matthew Stafford. 10,455% flex projected ownership, 10% captain ownership. Again, not somebody who you expect to run very much at all. Like even less, he has -4 rush yards on the season so far. So that's a fun start for the Matthew Stafford rushing. How much are you getting to of Stafford, and how much are you stacking him when you play him?
I'm getting 42% at flex. I'm getting 1% at captain. And I think that makes sense also for basically the same reasons that I was just saying that I thought Mac Jones at captain did make at least some sense. It is basically all the inverse for Matthew Stafford, where the Rams have such a concentrated target tree where everything goes to Puka, and then what's left goes to Devontae Adams, and then you have everybody else just fighting for scraps. What does the game, barring, like obviously there's some chance of injury for guys or just the random outlier game, but what does a game look like where Matthew Stafford, who doesn't run, like you said, so very limited rushing upside, very limited rushing touchdown upside, what does the game look like where Matthew Stafford has a big game and it's a bigger game than Puka or Adams in PPR, in full PPR? Like, that's just really hard to envision, I think, especially when you do have Matthew Stafford projected for some ownership. It's one thing if he's just not getting any ownership and you can say, okay, well, every weird situation I just named, it's more than 1%. And so I'm going to just play him at captain and hope for the best. But like, we have him projected at 10%. I have the one that I used has him at 7%. So he's just getting enough captain ownership where I would rather be allocating that to, Puka, Adams, McCaffrey, whatever. Like, this is a game where you have very dominant skill players, at least a few of them. And on the Rams specifically, again, you're just force feeding the ball to Puka and to Devontae Adams. So it's just hard to envision that game where Stafford has a good enough game that you want him at captain, but it doesn't lead to a bigger game for Puka or for Adams.
Yeah, exactly. Tough to get there. And I would imagine for that same reason, when you have Stafford at captain, you are going to be multi-stacking him because again, it's just so hard for him to put up a big score without throwing a ton. And if he's throwing a ton to like such a concentrated target tree, like pretty unlikely that somebody else doesn't have just an absolutely massive game of his receivers. So typically, I think if I have Stafford at captain, probably going to be multi-stacking there.
Yeah, the two lineups where I have him at captain, it's Puka, Whittington, and then it's Puka, Adams, and Whittington.
Okay, makes sense. Let's move on to more interesting positions. Running back, we have Christian McCaffrey is 11,400 projected for 48% flex ownership, 25% captain ownership. It's a fun slate because we have so much value. One of the things I said early last week on the main slate was I think it's viable to just start your lineups with Puka Nacua and Christian McCaffrey and then build around them. And that was for the main slate with 11 games on it last week. It was like, these guys are just such cheat codes in fantasy. They score so many fantasy points. They have such great opportunities. It's like hard for them to fail. Now we get both of them on a showdown slate with a ton of value. So I'm like, do we just play them in every lineup on the showdown slate? How much you get into of Christian McCaffrey?
Yeah, I'm getting to a lot. And like you said, there's so much value. They project so well. I'm getting right now to 48% at flex, 45% at captain. So between 90 and 100% of my lineups having McCaffrey in some form. And that's with ownership projections at 54% flex, 28% captain. So it is getting a little bit below the field at flex, but then pretty significantly over the field at captain. And he hasn't been, super efficient this year, but he's just getting so many opportunities. And there's no real reason to think, especially in full PPR, that those opportunities are going away here when you have Mac Jones and 0 wide receivers and you don't have your number one tight end either. It was something that actually interesting standing out. Like when I was looking through how this game is projected right now before the show, we're probably a little bit light on Mac Jones pass attempts. I think it was one way or the other. We're like one pass attempt light or one pass attempt over on Jones. But the main takeaway was like, it doesn't even matter for McCaffrey. Sometimes you want to be, if you really see a high projection on a running back, you really want to go back and make sure that like you're really confident in how often they're going to run versus pass. With McCaffrey, it doesn't really matter because if they run, it's just McCaffrey running. And if they throw, it's going to be McCaffrey catching it. It is that we're a little bit heavy on rushing attempts for the Niners. And I think you can make that case either way. Like, they could end up having to throw a lot just because they're getting their asses kicked. But also, Mac Jones is your quarterback and Christian McCaffrey is your running back. You probably would like to limit the number of possessions the Rams have and run the ball a little bit more. So a lot there, I think, really is just going to depend in terms of run pass on when exactly the Rams get out to a nice lead and how long into the game the Niners are able to kind of just try and limit possessions. But either way, McCaffrey's just so heavily involved that he's going to look really good individually either way.
Yeah. So far, not a great matchup for running backs against the Rams. It is the third worst matchup so far for running backs against the Rams, negative for both receiving and rushing work. And I just don't think it matters that much for Christian McCaffrey because he's so involved. Like you said, in either way, he's going to have just so many like easy PPR points regardless. And then he's going to have so many opportunities. He's going to get a fair amount of yards. So one of the rare instances where I'm like, yeah, this matchup is really tough. And like, sure, I'd prefer it was a better matchup, but also don't care that much. Also not a great matchup for Rams running backs against San Francisco. Again, negative in both rushing and passing work. While we're here, I should also didn't even look at it for quarterbacks, so I'll just bring it up real quickly here. And it's a middle of the pack matchup for both quarterbacks. Anyway, so we Christian McCaffrey, you say you have a lot of them. Are you going to be over the field at what we have 25 and 48%? Do you anticipate you'll be over those numbers?
I'm under at flex, over at captain right now.
Okay.
Emwald does have a good point in chat that you can kind of like expand on too. He said, do you guys think there's any reasonable chance Brian Robinson gets way more work in what the Niners seem to have deemed a throwaway game? I don't expect that like out of the gate. Like, I doubt that their game plan going in today is just, fuck it, we're going to run Brian Robinson over Christian McCaffrey. But obviously, if this just gets out of hand early, you do run the risk, probably more so than usual, of them just saying, all right, we're going to take it easy. But also, like, this is a Thursday game. So you could make the argument that not that they would go into the game, just not planning to use McCaffrey, but maybe McCaffrey's intended workload is going to be a little bit lower than it normally would be because it's Thursday anyway. And then, it is a Thursday game and the Rams are up, let's say 3 touchdowns or something out of the gate, that they, again, just kind of throw the towel in early. I think that sort of volatility probably exists a little bit more in this game than it would on your typical Sunday game. So, if you are, again, if you, going back to what we were saying earlier, if you are somebody that is going to try and use the Sims to like play out different scenarios that could reasonably happen, but that aren't the most likely case, that is certainly one to play around with. Like, how much do I need to cut Christian McCaffrey's workload before he's actually not a good play? How much do I need to bump Brian Robinson's workload before he is a really good play? Stuff like that is definitely something that is worth exploring.
Yeah, and these like it seems like kind of a like far out thing to consider, but like on a showdown slate, these are absolutely the kinds of angles that you should be thinking about and playing around with. On a main slate, I don't do a ton of like the trying to play into different narratives like this. I like, depending on the ownership, it can be worth exploring a little bit. But yeah, on a showdown slate, like you definitely need to be thinking about all angles. So I like that one. I had not really considered the potential for Brian Robinson playing more in a throwaway game. The assumption, I think most people are going to come in with the assumption of like everybody else out for the Niners is going to be McCaffrey getting 35 touches. Whereas, yeah, this is also a chance where it's just like, yeah, the game could get out of hand pretty quickly, and suddenly it is the Brian Robinson show. So let's talk about,
to elaborate on that, because
yeah.
Steven doesn't seem to have understood what I was saying, and I don't mean that as like a derogatory thing, but I don't. He said San Francisco has a system. I don't believe that McCaffrey can get more touches than prior games. I don't believe that he has a better game because of the injuries. Rams will exploit his inefficiencies. Like, this offense in general is likely to be less efficient because they're missing all of their best players other than Christian McCaffrey. That's accounted for in projections. And yeah, it's not saying like McCaffrey's just going, they're going to run every single play and just keep handing it to McCaffrey. McCaffrey projects similarly to how he would in any other game. But he's clearly going to be the highest projected player by an even bigger margin because you don't have Jennings, Kittle, Pearsall. So the fact it's McCaffrey looks better relatively to his teammates, because Bourne and MVS and Sky Moore and Demarcus Robinson are worse than Kittle, and Tungus are worse than Kittle and Pearsall and Jennings. And McCaffrey is still Christian McCaffrey getting all those opportunities. And again, on DraftKings, every time he catches the ball, it's a point.
Right. Yeah. It's and Chocold says CMC could get 100 yards and not be optimal at that price. So yeah, it's definitely true that he could get put up a pretty big score. He could score 20 fantasy points and still not be optimal. But again, this is such a stars and scrubs slate. It's like we just have so much value on this slate that it's a little bit different than if we did have a healthy Jennings and Pearsall. Because in those cases, like, well, those guys can outscore him, and he scores 20 and they each score 18, and suddenly you don't need him because he's too expensive. Whereas here, it's like if he scores even 20 fantasy points, which is less than he's projected for, less than he scores most weeks, he could still be optimal just because you just need the raw points because you have so much value to mix in there with the raw points. So I think that it's more likely than usual that he is going to be optimal, even if he does not score a ton of fantasy points. But it sounds like so you're actually not getting too crazy high above the field overall. You're a little bit over the field at captain, but below the field at flex. So it kind of washes out to. It's not like you have him in 95% of your lineups. It's more like,
No, I do.
Oh, you do, just like way more at captain.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Just a ton of interesting.
Yeah, and like, I mean, that might come down a little bit. Like, I might end up walking him back a little just because, again, of the Thursday night thing and the potential blowout. Like, but it's just so hard on a slate where you have infinite value to not be getting there. Because also, to push back on what Choke Hold'em had said, in addition to what you said, where there's infinite value, if McCaffrey gets 100, you have to keep in mind, if McCaffrey gets 100 yards, and he didn't specify if he's talking about receiving or rushing, it doesn't matter. But unless something really weird happens, it's 100 yards plus a point for every single time Christian McCaffrey catches the ball.
Right.
In addition to then the receiving yardage.
Right. And I mean, if he gets to 100 yards, like just rushing, or I don't know if you mean scrimmage yards. If it's scrimmage yards and it's split between them, you don't get the bonus in that case. But if he gets to 100 yards, either of rushing or receiving exclusively, then you also get the 3 points there on top of the PPR points, on top of the yards. And that's not even counting any potential touchdowns. It's just the projection is going to be great. Obviously, as we've talked about, there are ways it can go sideways. It could end up being a blowout one way or the other. You know, it could be the Niners blow out the Rams. There are a lot of ways that it just doesn't play out in the way we expect, and he doesn't end up getting his usual opportunities. But in most games, Christian McCaffrey is just going to get a ton of touches, and those touches just add up, even without any big plays or touchdowns.
Yeah, and also, like, just to elaborate on the throwaway game thing, there's basically zero chance the Niners are coming into this game planning on
throwing away,
trying to win. Like, that's not what anybody's suggesting. But it is a Thursday game where you could expect just a little bit less of a workload for McCaffrey. You can expect a little bit less of a workload for Kyren also. It's more so the throwaway game, quote unquote, having to do with at what point in the game, if they are getting killed, do they just say, all right, on to the next one? Let's take advantage of not having to let Christian McCaffrey get beat up like he does every single week.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about the possibility of more work for Brian Robinson if things don't go exactly right, and because of the the short week and stuff, we've got Brian Robinson at 6% flex ownership, 2,400. Are you getting too much, Brian Robinson?
I'm getting like 2% right now. Maybe gets a little bit higher if you cut McCaffrey's workload back a little bit. The problem with Robinson, I think, though, is one, you have so many value plays on the slate. So it's not just a matter of having to increase his workload to where he is a good point per dollar play. You have to increase the workload to where he's beating out all of the pass catchers in full PPR. But also, he's not somebody that catches a lot of passes. So if you were to dial back, if you wanted to just make lineups that play out that game script where, like, Christian McCaffrey, the game gets out of hand, Christian McCaffrey has a more limited workload, Brian Robinson is on the field more, etc., you have to keep in mind that, like, you're allocating more of McCaffrey's rushing workload to Robinson, you're not just transferring McCaffrey's catches to Robinson. Those are going to the pass catchers, and being spread out to those guys, whoever they may be. So it's not as simple as just like saying, oh, well, the fourth quarter, McCaffrey's points become Robinson's points. Like maybe McCaffrey's carries become Robinson's in that game script, but it's generally not going to like be a bunch of checkdowns to Brian Robinson.
Right. But then the appealing part is the 6% ownership. So that's like in a 150 set, I'd be surprised if I don't get to some Brian Robinson. Not like you said, not a huge priority, and it's a little bit different than most games because he is competing with so many other value plays that are just like better value plays, and honestly, some of them are also pretty contrarian. So it's a little bit of a tougher game in general to figure out like how do you want to split up your value and your low owned plays, because we have, I think, a few really nice low owned plays that have some upside. So how much ultimately are you getting to of Brian Robinson?
2% right now. It might come up a little bit. But again, for the reasons I said, I think it's kind of difficult unless you decide that like your stance on this slate is just shit hits the fan and the Niners call it quits at halftime and Brian Robinson gets 20 carries or something. Like unless you're taking that kind of stand, I think it's just hard to get him to show up that much. And one thing I would point out, because Josh just said it and it's already come up a couple times, especially in Showdown, you guys have to stop thinking in terms of pay off salary. Like you need the optimal lineup, give or take. Unless something like really fucking random happens, you need the optimal lineup to win large field Showdown tournaments. And so like, I'm not saying if you're playing a lot of lineups that you maybe shouldn't take a Garendo flyer. If you are gonna go fully with the angle of like, I think McCaffrey is limited in this game for whatever reason, like, yeah, then Garendo starts getting some carries behind Brian Robinson too. But you don't want to think of it as Garendo doesn't have to do much to pay off $400. Garendo needs to get into the optimal lineup no matter what his salary is. And on this slate, because there are so many cheap plays and so many lineups are leaving salary on the table, that means that he needs to beat out guys that are $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 more than him, not just score 5 points at $400 or something.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing you just said there is on this slate. Like this is a very specific slate to think about. So like, yeah, on some slates you can think about it like, yeah, to pay off that salary, like he just like one fantasy point might be enough because you have all these pay ups and there's no other value. But this is just not that slate. We have so much value that you need him to do more than pay off his salary. Like you said, you need him to actually get into the optimal, and that's going to be tough for a guy who has not really played this year. I mean, just looking at his report so far, he's zero snaps on the year. I was not actually expecting zero snaps. Yeah, it just tough to really want to play Garendo. Again, could be a script where he plays a little bit more, but because there is so much value, yeah, probably tough to get to much Garendo.
Like
here.
I think that the Garendo thing would actually make more sense if in a situation where, like, let's say the Niners were fully healthy except Brian Robinson were out.
Yeah,
because then you have this game where the Rams have two unbelievably good skill players. The Niners have McCaffrey, but then also have very good skill players in Jennings, Pearsall, Kittle. And you're just like, man, I want to play all these guys, not to mention the quarterbacks. But they're all expensive and there's not really secondary plays anywhere. Like that kind of game is where the $400 guy becomes more appealing, in my opinion. More so than the game like this, where it's just like, all right, what has to happen for Garendo to even get on the field, which he hasn't done this year? And then I need him to also beat every cheap player in this game, of which there's like 15.
I'm trying to. There was just a game recently where there was a player in there that had like 0.6. Oh, I think it was the game that that Drew was sweating.
Yeah, it was Hunter Lipke for a while.
It was Hunter Lipke, yeah, at 0.6. But that was like because of that specific game that like could have worked out where you really needed the 0.6 because we just didn't have any other great value. And we had all the expensive guys were smashing. This just does not appear to be that game. We could be wrong. Like it could be that it's just like you need all of Kyron, Devontae, Puka, Stafford, and like you can't actually use any of the other value. Like there is a scenario where that happens.
But then also, like in that game, why is Garendo on the field?
Right.
Which, I mean, like, yeah, weird stuff happens, obviously. But,
yeah,
you know, there's also like Sky Moore is less than $1,000, I think.
Right. yeah, there are a lot of there's so much value. It's tough to envision. Obviously, it can happen if you want to play him in a 150 set. He's viable, but he's certainly not a priority. Not somebody. I don't think I'm going to get there because I
I
think
have
I'm
a
going to be
0 point
splitting.
projection on him. So like outside of
Yeah,
outside of I'm going to outside of technically anybody that is active on a showdown slate is viable. This is as not viable as you can get on a
yes,
showdown slate.
yes, agreed. I mean, again, he's it looks like he has been active for 3 games and has not played a snap. So even if he is active, like that's not an indication that he's going to play. Yeah, tough to get to Garendo. I assume that means he's playing some special teams.
Right.
I have not actually looked at that. All right. Outside of, are you getting to any use check?
No, but he's at least like mildly sort of interesting, I think. Just because like he could get the 1 yard carry or he,
Yeah.
Catches a pass and happens to score. Like, he's somebody that will be on the field. That's the kind of guy more so for me. Like, again, not that it never happens with somebody like Garendo where like McCaffrey gets hurt the first play of the game. I think we saw that last year, or 2 years ago or something, like with Garendo specifically. There was a Garendo game.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, that did happen last year.
So, but like outside of that, it's the guys like guys like Juice Check, at least they're on the field. Their job when they're on the field isn't to score fantasy points, but you're on the field and occasionally you'll catch a pass in the right spot and suddenly you have 7 points. That said, like on this slate, I still think he's very difficult to get to. I don't have him right now at 2K. You're muted or I lost connection.
Yeah, totally on your end, not on my end. Chat, you don't need to confirm. He'll just have to trust me on this. On the Ram side, potentially even more interesting because we saw Blake Corum take on. Well, I guess we can debate whether Blake Corum really took on more work last week. So we'll take a look at them. We'll start with Kyren Williams though. Salary of 9,000, projected for 33% flex ownership, 10% captain ownership. As we noted, kind of a bad matchup so far for running backs against the Niners. Nick Bosa is out for the rest of the season, but you'd think that helps a little bit. He's more of a pass rusher, but I assume he's also pretty good in the against the run, or at least it's an upgrade for running backs against the Niners to some extent, I would think, but not a great matchup regardless with the 49ers. Maybe a little bit more split work here. What do you think of Kyren at these ownership numbers?
Yeah, I mean, he's still the lead back. He's just not the lead back to the extent that he has been in the past. And that does matter a bit more for Kyren than it would for some other running backs because, one, he's not super efficient. He never really has been super efficient. Most of his fantasy value has been that he's on an offense that is productive and he's the only running back that gets carries in competitive games. That's not the case anymore. Corum has operated as an actual backup running back here. And then Kyren also has never been super involved in the passing game. So, if you were to take somebody like McCaffrey and say, well, he's actually going to give half of his carries to Brian Robinson, you'd be like, all right, well, that lowers his projection. That sucks. But also he's still going to look good because he's going to catch 100 passes. That's not the case for Kyren. So he is somebody that is hurt relatively more than some other running backs would be by having an actual backup running back here, but he still looks fine, I think. I mean, it's still a showdown slate where he is the lead running back. I'm getting to 40% at flex right now, 13%, or no, that's FanDuel. Getting to 41% at flex, 5% at captain. I think that puts me a little bit below the field at captain and then around the field at flex, which I'm okay with. Again, if you wanted to make the same argument that the Thursday argument for Kyren, you could, like, maybe they lean on him a little bit less. Maybe you get an extra carry or two for Corum just because it is Thursday. Like, that's perfectly fine. But again, on a slate with infinite value, Kyren still has rushing touchdown upside, obviously. I think he looks fine. Like, I'm less excited about him than I am Puka or Adams or McCaffrey, obviously.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the same page that I'm on. Like, it's tough to want to play Kyren when I can just play better players who are getting better opportunities. But he is still the pretty clear lead back here on the season. 68 carries to Blake Corum's 23, 10 targets to Blake Corum's 5. I think just looking at the box score last week, a little bit misleading because Blake Corum had 4 targets, same number as Kyren, but still it was Kyren ran 60% of the routes to Blake Corum's 15.6%. So I think that's a little bit of a fluke, at least in terms of the like split passing game involvement. But 13 to 9 carries. I mean, we're getting closer and closer to a split in terms of the carries. And I think you said it exactly right. It's like Kyren has never been a super efficient running back. So it's always been, if you like take him in fantasy, like the worry is if he loses any of his workload, like from like just that top notch level, suddenly he becomes not a great fantasy asset. And that's kind of what has happened this year. Agree with you, Josh. Corum is so bad. Why is he stealing touches from Kyren? They should just be playing the rookie Jarquez Hunter, who I drafted on all of my best ball teams instead of benching him. So Kyren, totally fine play. Not as much of a priority as CMC, Puka, Devontae Adams. Maybe the next in line of the skill position players after those 3. Probably, I mean, I guess would be the next in line after those 3. But not as high on him as the others. And then Blake Corum, 3,000 projected for 17% flex ownership, no captain ownership. Again, in the last game, 9 carries. He saw 4 targets on 15.6% route participation. How much interest do you have in Blake Corum?
Yeah, I have like 10% Corum right now. Again, if I end up walking back a couple carries from Kyren, it's going to make Corum look a little bit better. The bull case for Corum would be that, one, it is Thursday, so maybe he gets a little bit more work. He's been getting more work in general. And it was Steven had just said, what are the Rams doing at the goal line? It's kind of a similar split in the red zone that it's been overall, where so far this season, 45% of the carries inside the 10 have been Kyren, 18% have been Corum, 55% inside the 20 have been Kyren, 22 have been Corum, 3 carries inside the 5 for Kyren, 1 for Corum. So like Kyren is the guy, but it's not like it's not like red zone work is exclusive to Kyren. Corum's getting enough where obviously he could just be the one that gets in the end zone here. So that would, sort of be the bull case for Corum. The bear case is beyond the obvious that he is still the backup running back here. Just again, the abundance of cheap plays. There are a lot of slates where if Blake Corum scores a touchdown, he's kind of automatically optimal. I don't think this is one of those slates. I think you need probably, in a lot of cases, Blake Corum to score a touchdown and like then actually do some other stuff, because you still need him to beat pretty much every pass catcher on the Niners, or probably a couple of them.
Sounds like so you're pretty bullish on some of these other values scoring significant fantasy points. That's where I'm like, I don't know that we need to see anybody score like more than 12 of like Kendrick Bourne and all these other cheap options. So like scoring a touchdown does still go a long way, I think.
Yeah, it goes a long way, but it's not like there are just a lot of slates where if the backup running back scores, you need the backup running back.
Oh yeah, true.
Like if you say ahead of time on a lot of slates that Blake Corum scores a touchdown, his optimal rate just like skyrockets to, you just assume you need to have him. On this slate, it obviously jumps because now that he scored a touchdown, so his projection goes up. Yeah. But you don't say like, okay, I'm just going to play. If you knew for sure Blake Corum scores a touchdown on this slate, you would play a lot. You wouldn't play 100%. There's a lot of slates where if Blake Corum scores a touchdown, you just click him in every lineup and take your chances.
Yeah, no, that is true. I mean, yeah, at 3,000, still not that many, but yeah, a lot of slates where I'd play a ton of Blake Corum. Yeah,
and it's not that true. Like I think there are big scores coming for a lot of other players. It's that there are a lot of other players in this price range that he still has to beat out.
Yeah. So even if he scores 10,
have a higher score than them.
Yeah, that is true. And then I assume no Jarquez Hunter has he not even been active? He does not have a carry on a snap on the season.
He's been inactive a lot. I don't know if it's been every game or not.
Okay. Unfortunately, we cannot play Jarquez Hunter unless we get some big changing news between now and lock. Let's move on to wide receivers. Should remind people, please do like the video if you have not already done so. This is a free video. Subscribe to the channel if you are interested in more content. I'm trying to get to 6,000 subscribers by the end of the NFL season and could use your support. Have a long way to go there. And then again, you can use promo code Neil if you want to get 10% off your first payment on any product at Run the Sims. we're going to move on and talk about wide receivers, and we will start with the 49ers side, which again, we have Juwan Jennings out, Ricky Pearsall out, tight end George Kittle remains out. So pretty wide open pass catcher core for the 49ers. I think everywhere is projecting it to be Kendrick Bourne and Demarcus Robinson as kind of the top two. That is what Run the Sims has. Kendrick Bourne 4,600, Demarcus Robinson 3,600. Bourne projected for 30% and 3% ownership. Demarcus Robinson 33% and 3% in the captain. So a lot of ownership going to those two. They are the primary two to look at. How much you get into of Bourne and Demarcus Robinson. We can start there, and if you want to start branching into the other 49ers receivers, you can do that as well.
Yeah, I'm getting to 18% Bourne and 23% Robinson right now. One thing I will say, though, is that the ownership projections that I used were quite a bit lower on Valdez-Scantling and more than ours are, and ultimately than I think ownership will be. And so that's going to shape my cheap player exposures in general here. Just because the lineups I built were operating with the assumption that like nobody's really playing Valdez-Scantling, nobody's really playing Sky Moore. I think there's the overarching point here and the main takeaway is that there is a ton of volatility in how fantasy points are scored for the Niners pass catchers here.
Yes.
Bourne and Robinson are probably running the most routes. Bourne, I think you can be very confident in that. You've seen him running a lot of routes anyway. And then now, obviously, there's just infinite routes available. Around 70% route participation last week with Jennings and Pearsall in. Pearsall, left early, but still 70% route participation for Bourne. 80% the week before that, where Pearsall was at like 100%. Jennings was out. 60% the week before that. So you're expecting Bourne to run tons of routes. Robinson, it was his first game last week. He ran around 30 to 35%. I assume he plays a lot more. I don't know the answer to like how much more. Can he play? Will he play? Etc. I'm expecting somewhere around 65, 70, maybe 75%. So I think that you do see the most routes go to Bourne, followed by Robinson. But I'm expecting Sky Moore to be third there. We saw him run around 60% the week that Jennings was out, and that's compared to about 20% for Valdez-Scantling. And then last week, only around 10% for Moore, but Valdez-Scantling was inactive. So we've seen Moore ahead of Valdez-Scantling. So I'm assuming you're getting Sky Moore as the 3, and then Valdez-Scantling running the 4th most. Malik Turner, I still need to add to projections, assuming that he's going to be activated, probably 5th. So with Valdez-Scantling, you get that big playability. You've seen it. You've seen him be optimal and completely break slates on 2-3 targets more times than you would like. Obviously, that can happen. I think Moore is going to be out there a lot. So I'm getting a lot of Valdez-Scantling right now. But again, that's because the ownership projections I used were lower on them than I think they actually will be. But in terms of like just projection, expectation, confidence level, I would say it's Bourne, then Robinson, then Moore, then Valdez-Scantling, then Turner.
So that was my instinct also, but it is also worth noting that in this game where Moore ran 60% of the routes, Demarcus Robinson wasn't active for that game.
Right.
Oh, right. We already have, Demarcus Robinson as the number 2 there. Yeah, I think that's right. It's so tough to break this down because we've had like no games with this exact scenario, obviously, because we've had Pearsall has played every game so far. Jennings has played 3 of them. So sorry, you have it Bourne, Demarcus Robinson, then Sky Moore, then MVS as your likely order. Okay, yeah. I think I see it the same way. But it is just interesting kind of looking at the grid here of like how do you make sense of what has happened so far? Somebody asked who's running the most slot routes, and I pulled this up and it's like, well, this doesn't give us any clarity at all. Like it doesn't tell us anything as far as who's running because nobody's running more than 32% in the slot. Is Russell Gage active at this point? Do you have him?
Not that I've seen. I'm assuming it's going to be Malik Turner. But
okay.
I haven't seen who they've activated.
Okay. Yeah, I have not looked into Russell Gage at all. But yeah, weird situation. And I think everywhere actually has pretty low ownership projections on Sky Moore and MVS. Let me just we can double check one other source here with RG. They have MVS at 5%, Sky Moore at 8%, which to me, those are really appealing ownership numbers on those two.
Yeah, and to kind of pull everything together on those guys, because we talked about the routes, but I agree with chat to some extent at least, where someone said it's an MVS slate, and then Chris said Sky will run ghost routes all night without a target. So you do have to remember too that like we've seen Sky Moore's route participation clearly be ahead of MVS, but the volatility is kind of different for those guys. Like for Sky Moore, maybe you'll get some like design touches on screens, low ADOT plays where he gets a target, he gets a reception, gets the point for that. But for MVS, like you're gonna have typically more volatility in like, yeah, he runs less routes, he gets less targets, but every target is just like a slate winning target if he catches it. You just kind of always have that deep ball volatility with MVS. So all routes aren't created equal.
Yeah. Steven asks, are any of the Niners that are available at wide getting a disproportionate air yards number? So I pulled that up here. I mean, not really, but it's been kind of a small sample. Demarcus Robinson actually leading in his one game with 11.7% of the air yards in that game. Kendrick Bourne at 10.7%. In terms of, we can also look at ADOT. Demarcus Robinson 15.5, ADOT, MVS 11.5. We know based on past experience that he's capable of breaking off a big one. I think Sky Moore is also capable of some splash plays. Kind of they all are.
Kendrick Bourne generally is gonna, like when you talk about the two top guys, for lack of a better way of phrasing Kendrick Bourne and Demarcus Robinson here.
Yeah.
Demarcus Robinson generally going to be your big play threat. Kendrick Bourne generally going to be your lower ADOT, higher, higher catch rate guy.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on the receivers for the 49ers?
No.
Again, I will be going live again about 85 minutes prior to lock. At that point, I will have inactives. Maybe something changes with inactives. Maybe nothing changes. But just a reminder, if you want to join me for that, I'll have a little bit more information when I go live later on. On the Ram side, less interesting, but actually, honestly, still kind of interesting at wide receiver, but not that interesting at the top from the standpoint of you just know that you want to play Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. Puka projected for 43% flex ownership, 32% captain ownership. Adams 38 and 8. How much are you getting to of Puka Nacua?
Right now, only getting like 40% at flex and 30% at captain. I would honestly like more, but obviously that is also a lot. He's expensive, but it's clearly fully warranted. Just unbelievable, not only productivity, but usage. So he's not one of these guys where you look at and you're like, yeah, he's leading the NFL in receiving yards through 4 weeks, but he's just running incredibly hot. And, there's XYZ reason that you're expecting him to regress. Yeah, he's obviously running hot in terms of he's just playing really, really well. He's catching everything, but he has a good quarterback. As long as Stafford stays healthy, you have a quarterback that is going to be able to get him the ball. He's in he's in McVay's system, so he's in a good system. And he's been targeted. He's earning 0.43 targets per route run so far. He's always, just been somebody that's going to earn a lot of targets anyway. And he's somebody that probably is getting better. Like this is somebody that's in his third year now in the NFL. He's probably getting better. So, probably doesn't earn 0.43 targets by the end of the year, but probably still at 0.35 or something absurd. He's just going to continue to project incredibly well. I believe his prop line is over under 94.5 yards. I think we have him projected for 99 yards. Anytime you see somebody projected for 100 yards in a game, you kind of do a double take, but it's impossible to really get a lower projection than that without just making shit up on Puka. So he looks great. And then, on top of that, full PPR as well. He's getting a point. It's kind of like McCaffrey. He's getting a point every time he catches the ball, and he has a crazy high catch rate. And then you get to Devontae Adams, who probably has a little bit more touchdown equity, just given his size and general role. And he's earning 0.27 targets per route run, which is more human, but it's still at the top, high end of what wide receivers usually earn, and really stands out because it's put alongside Puka. It's just every pass is going to Puka or Adams.
Yeah, insane workload there for Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. 50 targets, leads the NFL through 4 weeks by 8 targets. So 2 targets more per game than second most targeted player in the NFL. Insane workload for Puka. Devontae Adams, somebody just asked his health status. Stephen, thank you for the reminder on Devontae Adams. Has been dealing with a little bit of a hamstring injury. So I just looked up. He was asked about it on Tuesday. He told reporters that he's feeling significantly better, but still isn't 100%. He said, good, much, much better. I wouldn't say it's 100%, but this game is not 100% health for really anybody. I felt a lot better than how I felt I would. I feel a lot better now than what I thought I'd feel after last week's game. So that is, sort of interesting. Another angle we can play is if you think that Adams does could potentially see limited workload here because of the hamstring, or obviously there's always re-aggravation risk. Who could benefit from Devontae Adams being out? And that would probably be Jordan Whittington, I would think, would benefit the most. Maybe Tutu Atwell. But that's another angle you can play, is if you want to get away from Devontae Adams for that reason, you can. I still think you probably just want a lot of Devontae Adams. Again, 25% target share would lead some NFL teams by quite a bit. Like, it looks like nothing compared to Puka Nacua, but still compared to most NFL players, huge target share for Devontae Adams. How much do you say you're getting of Devontae?
So for Adams right now, I'm getting to 32% at flex. I only have 1% at captain.
Okay.
That's a pretty low number, and certainly wouldn't be upset if it got higher. I'm not in like a huge hurry to be taking away McCaffrey or Puka captain exposure, but if I were a little bit more balanced there, I wouldn't mind. But this whole Devontae Adams health thing, is like the perfect example too of why it is so difficult and kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, on dealing with guys that are active, but they're dealing with some sort of injury. You'll always get like the hindsight analysis where if Devontae Adams runs 70% of routes and plays like shit, it's going to be like, wow, the edge today was that people played Devontae Adams with a hamstring injury. But like,
right,
you go back to Sunday, there were reports that you had the basically, we're going to monitor his health reports, which I've said before, anybody that plays NBA DFS knows that is absolutely meaningless. But you had the reports too that like, well, maybe the Rams are going to dial it back a little bit because they do have a divisional game on Thursday against the Niners. And then Devontae Adams goes out and runs 90+% of routes. So it really just illustrates that like it would have been completely reasonable for him to be limited somewhat last Sunday. It's completely reasonable for him to be limited somewhat today, but I don't really think that there's a lot you can do from just what is the most likely case standpoint beyond say the most likely case is he's going to go out there and play a normal workload. If you want to allocate some lineups to the, well, what if he doesn't game script, then sure, that's obviously reasonable. But, I don't think there's a whole lot you can do here in terms of most likely outcome than say like, yeah, he's probably going to just be fine.
Yeah, and I don't think Sean McVay is really a coach who limits his players all that much. Like we saw it last year, he kept on talking about like, oh, we want to do two drives for Kyron to one
Yeah.
for Blake Corum. We want to split it, and it just never. He kept on saying it, kept on not happening because it's just like, I just like that guy better. I'm going to play the guy who looks better, and I assume it's going to be the same with Devontae Adams as long as he is not like clearly limping or something out there.
Yeah. And he kind of alluded to that last week too with Adams, and especially in a case like this where it's Devontae Adams. Like the guy knows his body. The guy's been in the league for years. McVay sort of in that same, I don't know if, not necessarily same sentence, but like along with the whole snap monitoring his health, see how he feels kind of thing, basically said like, he's going to be really pissed off if I just tell him that he's on X snap count.
Yeah.
He's going to defer to Devontae Adams knowing how he feels.
Right. Beyond the top two, this is where it gets more interesting to me is Jordan Whittington and Tutu Atwell, because we can look at the route share report. Seems to be maybe a changing of the guard in terms of Atwell and Whittington in week 4. We saw Atwell's route participation drop to 35.6%, Whittington up to 62.2% in that game. Then Atwell catches one of his 2 targets for an 88-yard touchdown. So Whittington running way more of the routes in that last game. Kind of a fun player at 1,000. Atwell still has that big play upside and maybe earn back some of that role. I don't know. How are you seeing Jordan Whittington and Tutu Atwell?
There are two, I think, really good, like really bullish indicators for Jordan Whittington's route participation here. One is, like you said last week, you saw him jump Tutu Atwell in terms of route participation. The other is that, so we don't have Tyler Higbee today, which, obviously he's a tight end. And so your first thought is that routes are just going to go to other tight ends, which they will to some extent. But in week 2, we had Higbee active, but we had Colby Parkinson inactive. And as a result, Jordan Whittington's route participation jumped from 28% week 1 to 50% week 2, and then went back to 35% in week 3 when Parkinson returned. So you have kind of two different ways for Whittington rather to get on the field more. One is that he is actually ahead of Tutu Atwell now in the wide receiver rotation. The second is that even if he's not actually ahead of Tutu Atwell, it's just that he's taking some of the Tyler Higbee routes. So there are kind of two ways for him to play more. The negative is that if you're not named Puka and you're not named Devontae Adams, it doesn't really matter how much you're on the field. You're not getting targeted that much. But in terms of just being out there, having opportunities, we know that Whittington can make plays. I think there are two different arguments that you can make that hold water for why you should expect Whittington to be on the field here.
Yeah, and he looks great at 1,000. The price tag is nice, and you've got him at 16% ownership. How much are you getting to of Whittington?
I'm getting to 20%. Nope, that's FanDuel again. I'm getting to 21% at flex, 0.5% at captain.
How much did you put in for his ownership to get those numbers?
15% flex, okay. 1% captain.
All right, so right in line.
Yeah, and I had posted in Discord, several Discords, Endgame, Run the Sims. I liked his over 14.5 receiving yards yesterday. I think it's up to 15.5 now.
Nice.
Yeah, and he's somebody that, like, on my first run through of projections, he was coming in like way over that number, and then as I kind of like looked closer, I got him down closer to like 19, 20 yards. But I do think he's on the field a good amount. It's just a matter of what's happening as far as where Stafford's distributing the ball.
Yeah, because he's usually pretty condensed. Yeah, seems he's on the field enough that seems like a good play there. What about Tutu Atwell? Are you getting to any?
I'm only getting the 1% or 2% right now, which I'd like to have more, just in the sense that, like, he can still make big plays. He's going to be on the field. I think he's still on the field a good amount because of Higbee being out. Like, again, I think that some of those routes are just going to be redistributed to receivers. And so you have the combination of Atwell's normal role and then having some more routes available. I do have him projected to run less routes than Whittington, but I still think he's on the field a good amount. He can obviously make big plays. I prefer Whittington, but clearly, like you said, you saw it last week. He can still just make big plays in limited opportunities.
Yeah, I think, like, I would certainly want more than 1%, just because he is so capable of those big plays. Yeah, he's one that, like, Sean McVay talked about him so much in the offseason. I went from, like, because people were talking about him in best ball, I was like, I don't really get it, until reading the coach speak. It was like, oh god, Sean McVay like really believes that Tutu Atwell is going to take a leap this year. So maybe still going to have some.
This is why I don't look at coach speak, because he can believe he's going to take a leap wherever, like, however much he wants. Where's that leap happening when you have Devontae Adams and Puka ahead of you?
Well, yeah, I mean that is true. Tough to really work in there. Yeah, I feel like there was some coach speak. There was some coach speak that was really helpful, I thought, this summer. But yeah,
there's always going to be some that is and some that isn't.
There's also a lot that's just like, there's so much fluff from the coaches, and that was one that was like clearly, like, whenever you hear like, oh yeah, this player is ready to take a big leap, if they say it like once, but to me it's like the more they repeat it, the more I start to believe it. Like Rashad Bateman last summer was like, there was so much positive coach speak, and then there was also the, like, teammates. Oh, I think he's going to be awesome.
That's been the case for Rashad Bateman since he was drafted.
I mean that is true to some extent. Are you playing any other receivers from the Rams? I assume Xavier Smith, Konata Mumpfield, anybody?
I have 1%. Wait, what did I just? Oh yeah, no, I have like 1%. $200 Xavier Smith right now. Obviously, that could go away and I wouldn't notice. Yeah, that's just your 150 lineups on a showdown slate guy.
Is this like, did you guys put this guy in here like as a joke? Is this a bit? I've never heard this name, Konata Mumpfield. That's is that a real player in the NFL?
Yeah, I don't think he ran any routes last week.
Okay, I've never heard of this player.
He ran like 9% week 1, 6% week 2. I don't think he's been on the field since then.
Interesting.
Yeah,
let's move on.
This year, 0 targets.
We are out of starting tight ends in this game. George Kittle out. Now Tyler Higbee out. On the 49ers side, we've kind of already seen it on the 49ers side, what they want to do. Jake Tonges and Luke Farrell, and I guess Braden Willis. Tonges 4,200 projected for 14% flex, 1% captain. Farrell 5% flex, 0% captain. Starting with those, I guess all of the the tight ends. How much interest do you have in 49ers tight ends here?
I'm not getting too much. I have 6% Tongus, or however you pronounce that guy's name. 8% Farrell. That's probably just an ownership gap difference. 2% Willis. Like, obviously, these guys are going to be on the field and get targeted at a higher rate than they normally do. You would expect, just because you don't have Jennings and Pearsall dominating targets. Like, you're not expecting Bourne and Robinson to dominate targets to the same extent that those guys do. And then you have touchdown equity from tight ends always. So they look fine in that regard. It's still, guys that you're not going to be too excited about. Like, I think Tongus' receiving prop is like 26 yards or something. So like, they're fine, but I would ideally rather, like, I'm still probably just going to take more shots at the wide receivers, because in the case of the receivers that I don't like as much, Moore and Valdez-Scantling, they're probably not going to get that much ownership. Like, they're going to get less ownership than the tight end. And in the case of Bourne and Robinson, like, I actually like them more. They're, you're starting outside wide receivers, we assume.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Tonja's 16 targets through 4 games, and that's with Jennings and Pearsall, at least some of those games, healthy. Like, kind of interesting to me. Yeah. I don't know. Like, that is enough. Like, maybe this is a game where Tonja sees 9 targets or something like that. The price has come up to, sorry, what was the price on Tonja's? 4,200. So, like, he's not cheap, but I don't know. Like, would we be that surprised if he gets more targets than Kendrick Bourne?
No, not at all.
Yeah. So, sorry, how much you say you end up with Tonjas?
Only like 6% right now. I think it might come up a little bit, but I'm kind of just like flat right now on those tight ends.
Okay. Farrell about the same?
Yeah, I have like 8% Farrell. Like, the one thing here is that Tongus is just way more expensive than all of the other ones. Like, Farrell 1,600, but then also on the other side, like, Parkinson is 600.
Yep.
Davis Allen, not super exciting. He's 1,200. Terrence Ferguson, who I think, obviously we'll talk about more in a minute. He is somebody that I don't think is likely to be very involved. But if I had the point, outside of the obvious of, like, we don't actually have any idea. Well, we have an idea, but we don't actually know how the 49ers are going to distribute targets tonight, clearly. But if you had the points, like, one player where you're just like, we could just all collectively be really, really, really wrong on how he's projected, Terrence Ferguson, I think, is the answer there. In terms of just, like, the guy is a pass catcher. They didn't use him at all when Colby Parkinson was out, but what if they do with Tyler Higbee out? So there is that just kind of massive upside there as a cheap guy.
Yeah. True. Sorry, I'm finishing up my expert survey, so I'm on a different screen here. Any other notes on the tight end? I mean, so you think Terrence Ferguson might play here? He's been inactive, I think, or not. He was active, not really doing much.
He was active when Parkinson was out. They just still didn't use him.
Okay.
He ran like 5% of routes or something.
Yeah. Just week 2, 9% route participation. Has not run routes weeks 1, 3, and 4.
Yeah, he's been inactive every game except the game Parkinson was out. So I'm assuming he's active tonight. And then it's just a matter of, does he have the same role that he had when Higbee was in and Parkinson was out? Or is he suddenly running 40% of routes because Higbee's out?
There's a lot more route participation to soak up. That's true. We could see, kind of interesting at just 200. Not somebody that I've given a ton of thought to, just because he has not been actually playing, and they have so many other tight ends. But that is an interesting one.
To kind of illustrate, I think, how, again, the kind of everything on this slate, there's just like so much fragility in projections. But to kind of illustrate it here with Ferguson, I have him projected for 10% route participation, and he's in 8% of my lineups. So you can imagine like how much you would want of him if he actually were to just go run 35, 40% of routes.
Yeah, that is that's so if you put him in this again, you could play around with run the Sims. You put him in for like 30% route participation. My guess is that you get just a boatload of
Right.
Terrence Ferguson in that scenario. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, because it's one of those situations where the ownership isn't going to move with the route participation because everybody is going to project him similarly, I think, where it's, yeah, he probably runs some routes, but he's not going to be used a lot. You're going to get more routes for Whittington. You're going to get more for Atwell. You're going to see a bump for Parkinson. Like, I think that's just going to be the standard projection, and it's how it probably should be. But so it's one of those situations where, like, if he just goes and runs 35% of routes, nobody's going to know that. And so the ownership isn't moving. It's just going to be like, oh, wow, this guy is tight end, in terms of targets, ends up being tight end 1, and nobody played him.
Yeah, no, I like that. Not somebody honestly that I've given any thought to, but I think I will have to force in a little bit of Terrence Ferguson just in case he does end up, because it's like you said, like you don't really know what the Rams want to do now because this is the first game we've had Ferguson on the team and Higbee out. Maybe he does some things that the other tight ends don't do, and he does them better than those, and he will soak up more than expected. So yeah, I like that. I like that shout for Terrence Ferguson.
Yeah, and I think, and I agree with what Steven just said in chat about blocking. Like, Higbee's been getting, so far this season, Higbee's earned 0.13 targets per route run. This is not a team that's relying on their tight ends to catch passes because they have Puka, they have Adams. I expect the bigger emphasis to be on using Parkinson and Davis Allen, guys that, they clearly trust in their respective roles. And Higbee doesn't have a huge pass catching role that you have to try and recreate. So that's, again, why I think that the most likely case is that, Ferguson is on the field a little bit, but not a huge part of anything. But again, that's sort of an educated guess where it could just be wrong.
Yeah. Any other notes on tight ends?
Mateo said Rams GM said Ferguson is not there yet. Yeah, it's been very clear by the way the Rams keep making him inactive that he's not there yet. But the nice thing here too is that you will know inactives before the game. Obviously, if he's inactive, then all of this is irrelevant. You increase the projection a little bit on Davis Allen and on Parkinson. It's a little bit of a bump for Whittington and Atwell in terms of at least like confidence levels in their projection. But you just, like, if he's inactive, you just say, like, okay, cool, a little bit of a bump to the tight ends. They're going to be on the field a little bit more. Doesn't really change anything because he's not projected for a lot. If he's active, then you know that, and it's like, okay, we can assume he's going to at least step on the field probably. Ran 10% of routes week 2 and maybe get a little bit more. So it is nice, that you don't, it's not like the NBA where you're like, well, they're going to list him as active no matter what, and maybe he plays, maybe he doesn't. At least they tell you ahead of time.
Is Braden Willis too thin on this slate?
I had a little bit. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I had 2%.
All right. Yeah, he's like, and we know essentially, we think we know how they want to use him because we've had games without George Kittle now, and he's just played 7%, 0%, 2.5% route participation in those 3 games. So not exactly getting a ton of work there. Defenses, kickers, we've got, let's do all of them at once. Eddie Pinheiro, 5,000 projected for 17% flex. Niners, 6% flex, both 0 captain. On the Rams side, we have Joshua Carty at 21% and 1% of captain. Rams defense at 14% at 1% of captain. I've actually seen Rams defense north of 20% elsewhere. So that'll be one to monitor. But how much are you getting to of the kickers and defense this year?
I'm getting to a lot more of the Rams pairings on both sides. And I think that, so with the kickers, I think it's basically just one of those situations where I had like a 17 or 18% ownership projection on the Niners kicker and like 20% on Carty, the Rams kicker. And Carty projects better because his team's total is like 9 points higher or something. And he just projects better. So you have this situation now where, like, yeah, there's clearly volatility in kicker scoring because so much depends on, exactly how the offenses do. If the offense does horribly, it's bad for the kicker. If they do great, it's bad for the kicker. If they do pretty well. It's good for the kicker. So you have that sort of volatility, and then also, distance volatility. But if you have a higher projection by 1.5 2 points, and the same ownership on two guys that are priced the same, you're generally just going to play more of the higher projected ones. So that's what I'm getting right now with Cardi. Obviously, if ownership adjusts, then my exposures will too. And then kind of similarly with the Rams defense, with like a 14% ownership projection, I'm getting above that, and I'm not getting to too much of the Niners. Or actually, I'm at 16% Rams defense, so I'm around that. And then I have 8% of the Niners. So pretty much in line with ownership, I guess, on the defenses. It's at kicker where I'm basically just turning, like, I have 40% aggregate, so I have very similar exposures to the kickers. It's just that I have all of the Rams kicker and like none of the Niners kicker right now.
Right. So yeah, if the ownership ends up changing a little bit more, closer to what we have here, 21% to Cardi, I guess 17% Panero, not that big of a difference in terms of the ownership, but a little bit of a ownership disparity there. 49ers defense, I'm at 6% ownership at 3,800. I would have some interest, even with Nick Bosa out, but not not a super slam or anything like that. Anything else? I guess that's it as far as the play-by-play. Any other notes on this game?
Just I think a really fun one if you have time throughout the day and you want to just kind of play around with evaluating how different scenarios work. You can look at it for if backup running backs are more involved. You can look at it for how much does route participation, target share need to change for these different receivers for one of them to pop is like a really good play. There's a lot you can play around with because I think it's just a slate to keep in mind that for us and for anybody in the industry in general, there's just more fragility in projections because you're guessing at what teams are going to do before you see it. This is kind of similar to a week 1 game, even though it's week 5.
Yeah.
Particularly on the Niners side.
This is a very fun showdown slate to me. Like there's almost too many moving parts. Like I like games that are like a lot of it, and then there's like a few moving parts where like I think the field might be a little bit wrong about this or a little bit wrong about that. Here there's enough that it's like maybe a little bit too much. But then you also have like the very clear knowns in like Puka Nacua and Christian McCaffrey. So it's it's a pretty fun slate. Not like the ultimate best possible slate, but I do think that it is a fun slate.
I mean, it's a lot of words for a slate that's going to end up being 2 kickers, two defenses, and like
Puka Nacua and Christian McCaffrey. Yeah, exactly. It could be interesting. There are a lot of ways it could go really terribly, also, and it could be a 5,000 way chop if it goes certain ways. But it should be kind of fun. Anything else you want to shout before we get out of here?
Nope.
All right, I will. I'll be getting my article out at Fantasy Points Expert Survey at Roto Grinders. I will be live again tonight about 85 minutes prior to lock if you want to join after we get inactives, maybe some more coach speak, that kind of stuff, a little bit more information on that one. So you can check me out there. Please do like this video, subscribe to the channel, and of course, subscribe to Run the Sims. You can use promo code Neil to get 10% off your first payment on any of their products. I will be doing demos throughout the year on how I'm using Run the Sim. So if you don't know how to use the product, you can check out my demos and of course reach out if you have questions. Of course, Run the Sims also has their own channel where they've put out some demos as well. So you can check that out too. All right. Thanks everybody. I'll see you later.